Welcome to Invest in Yourself, brought to you by the Lewis Business Center.
Scott Lewis.
And I'm Roswell Wallace. The last episode we left off on, we were talking about credit. So we want to pick it back up from there.
Sounds good, man.
Yes, sir. You started to make a lot of good points about credit and the importance of it. Just to give our viewers a basic understanding of credit, you started to say how significant credit is and understanding things like debt to income ratio and things like that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the importance of credit, at least in my mind,
Yep.
right, is that it gives you the power that cash just doesn't give you. Right, cash, you spend it, it's gone.
Yep.
Right. In order for you to reclaim that cash, you have to go earn it. It has to come from somewhere else to kind of fill back. With credit is more so revolving, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say if you have a bill for $1,000 and you pay that bill, that $1,000 is still available to you, right? Mm-hmm. And the stronger your credit, the more access to spending power that you have, right? And it revolves. So this means that you're constantly paying that credit back, but you're constantly building that credit as you pay it back. Mm-hmm. So the more you pay it back, the quicker you pay it back, the more money the bank gives you access to. The more money that the bank gives you access to, the bigger and larger acquisitions you can make. Those acquisitions that you make, in turn, create more income, right? So you can buy a $200,000 house that might create, an income of $5,000-$6,000 a month. And then as you continue, next thing you buy a $500,000 house, that income starts to increase. So you're utilizing your credit muscle to create income that you're using to put back into building your credit muscle, which buys you more buying power, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of that is based on how you manage your credit profile. So your credit performance is very important, right? Mm-hmm. And the way I see it is some people are just worried about their credit score. I want to pay my bills on time so I can maintain a good credit score. And that's really important, but that's not the end goal, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. The end goal is, how can I build my credit that gives me access to larger amounts of capital? Because you can have a 700 credit score, but you can still only have access to $10,000. Yep. So you're not getting the most out of a great score, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to build and utilize your credit score, but you also want to build the amount of cash and credit that you have access to, because that's what's going to allow you to invest in larger assets to create more money.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that insight. I think when you were speaking, there were a few thoughts that I had. Let's go to the debt to income ratio specifically, because you're talking about the ability to gradually over time, as you strengthen your credit, increase your buying capacity.
Right.
But along with that, one of the things that people have to understand is that increasing your buying capacity, having that credit score is significant. But what goes alongside of that is being aware of your monthly expenses and your monthly income, because that's going to greatly impact how much credit you have access to also.
Right.
Right. So let's just say, a standard FHA loan. They might say that we want to see a debt to income ratio of 41%.
Right.
What that means is that all of your debts, the mortgage, car loans, lines of credit, anything like that, it means that all of those monthly payments can only equal up to 41% of your gross monthly income.
Right.
So I think part of the conversation is being aware of your income, but then also being aware of your consumption and debts that you're taking on.
Right.
So when you're able to, rather than, you might have money and you might be able to go out and get, a Benz, right? But the monthly payment on that might be $800 a month.
Right.
That's going to throw your debt to income ratio way off and really limit how much you qualify for.
Right.
So with that in mind, it would make more sense for you to just hold off a little bit on acquiring consuming that debt and acquiring the asset first. Because once you have the asset, now you have more income, and that purchase isn't thrown off your debt to income ratio, and now you have the asset with the cash flow that adds to your income, and then you go after the expense after.
So what you said is absolutely correct, right? But that's also true in the realm of a consumer mindset.
Yep.
Because when you have a consumer mindset and you're approaching it from a consumer mindset, you're utilizing debt in terms of how much you can afford to maintain things that don't necessarily create income. From an investment mindset or an entrepreneurial mindset, you have what they call good debt and bad debt. Bad debt is debt that you use to pay for your car, to pay for your house, to pay for the clothes. It's not used to create more income.
Correct.
Then you have the good debt. You go in debt so you can generate more money.
Yes, sir.
Right? And when you look at those factors, they have investment products where the actual asset that you're trying to acquire, as long as the income that's being generated from that asset covers that expense or that acquisition, your debt is not taken in consideration, your personal debt. Yes. The only debt that's taken in consideration is what does it cost to operate that home? And is the proceeds or are the proceeds that you make from that enough to cover those costs? So it's not going to attach you to your individual person.
Yes, sir.
Right? Because it's not going to be considered personal debt, it's going to be considered business debt. So from personal debt perspectives, like you said, you pay attention to those debt to income ratios, and the only way that you can really grow from a personal wealth is by creating more income to offset the limited debt that the mortgage companies might allow you to have based on that income, which is the debt to income ratio. From the investment perspective, it's about the asset itself. Can the asset generate enough money to support itself? Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's why most investors or most people that grow wealth, they carry a lot of debt. You got to learn how to manage a lot of debt. And you're managing good debt because that debt that you're taking on is creating you more income. So not being afraid to kind of carry a lot of debt is the very thing that's actually going to create you wealth, right? That's not to say it's without regard to the debts that you're incurring. It's just to say make sure that the acquisitions and the investments that you're making are generating enough income, not just to cover those debts, but also for you to be able to reinvest, because it's the reinvestment and it's the compoundation. Is that even a word? I just made that up. It's the compounding effect that's allowing you to create the wealth, right?
100%.
That's what's allowing you to create the wealth.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you're talking about the debt service coverage ratio type of loan, or DSCR for short,
Right.
where they're going to say that as long as the income from this property is some ratio, 1.1 or 1.2 times the monthly income, you can get the loan as long as you can come up with the down payment for it.
Right.
And that I agree with that 100%. Those are great options for investors to continue to acquire. I think one of the things that I was getting at too with the DTI, the debt to income ratio, is that it also helps you to tether your consumption and your personal expenses, because I know from my personal experience, if my expenses were exorbitant, $5,000 a month, and my income is $5,000 a month, I can't save or set aside any funds to start acquiring assets, right? If I'm maxed out on my ability to consume, and if it meets everything that I produce, then I'm not going to be able to build or acquire any other assets. So they kind of go hand in hand a little bit in that if you can be mindful of your consumption and allow yourself to acquire or save a little bit between what you consume and what you produce, that is one that can be your investment nut.
Yeah.
There's other ways to come up with capital for the down payment, right? Like if you learn how to fundraise or get money from people around you, if you know how to evaluate a deal, then you could say, hey, this deal can make 20% return on investment. If you bring the money, I'll do all the work and manage it. You can get 10%, and I can get 10%. So you can create opportunities out of without having
the down
any
payment.
money,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that requires some skill and some time and some effort. So either way, you got to figure out, because even if, let's say you're meeting your expenses monthly and you're fully consuming everything you produce, now even creating that opportunity is another production, right? It's almost like, imagine like having a part-time job, right? Another source where you're able to get capital or acquire, I just call it energy.
Okay.
It's an easier way to put it
Right.
because everything's just a movement of energy.
Yeah.
Acquire more energy than you're consuming so that you can put it into something else that it can continue to grow.
Right.
So I think that, we talk about energy a little bit, but I think understanding consumption and production and acquiring assets in terms of energy kind of, at least in my mind, helps me to make these monetary concepts a little bit more general. I had a train of thought that I lost. But does that resonate with you?
It does resonate. I think that, again, everything is mindset, right? I think the most important part that we can say to people is your mindset is going to dictate your strategy, right? If your mindset is to save, then the debt to income ratio becomes very important, because that whole formulation is based on being able to save, which is why they don't want your debt to income to be 100%, 100 to 100. They would say, 41% of your 100% of income that you make can be your debt, so the other 60% you can save, right? Mm-hmm. From an investor mindset is, we want to take as much money that we're able to generate and reinvest it.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? And as long as we're reinvesting it to create enough income or wealth to cover our debt, not for the sole purposes of covering our debt though, but for the sole purposes of being able to take on more debt.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because if your lender understands that, hey, this guy is a money generating machine, the way he's thinking, and if he can pay us $15,000 or $20,000 a month regularly, then we can give him hundreds of thousands of dollars of credit buying power, as opposed to somebody that's only going to pay $1,000 a month. So as an investor, my mindset tells me to generate as much cash as I can, not so I can save it, but so I can reinvest it. And by reinvesting it, I'm building my credit power. Now, the banks are going to want to see that you're able to do this over a period of time. They're not going to say, okay, you just got lucky one time. You got to kind of show that there's a consistent cash flow coming into your account. It doesn't matter how much is going out. Like, you can bring in $100,000 a month and $99,000 can go out. All they want to know is that you can pay whatever that liability is per month. Yep. And if they see that you're taking that money and you're reinvesting it into other things, $100,000, credit line $200,000, $500,000. In some cases, unlimited.
Right.
So for me, I like to generate as much monthly income that I can, not based on how much profit I make, but how much money I can generate so I can reinvest it, because I'm still in the acquisition phase in obtaining and trying to build wealth. Right. And then when I finish that phase, if I have 30, 60, 100 pieces of property that's generating wealth, then I can get to a point in life where I can say, okay, it's enough of taking on debt. Now I can figure out how do I minimize that debt. And then while I'm taking that process of minimizing that debt, now the cash accumulation is coming in, then I can start storing it, right? Not necessarily saving it, but storing it for whatever the next project is gonna be.
Right.
So if an opportunity comes my way, I got the liquid cash needed to put down on the debt that's gonna purchase the property. Because
Right.
if you see a property for $1 million, if you only need 10% or 20%, you need 200,000. The bank is gonna furnish the other 800,000.
Yeah.
And if you're making enough money to cover that payment, that monthly payment, whatever that is, that's really what they're satisfied about.
Yeah.
But you have to maintain that credit score, because as soon as the credit score starts to go down, the banks will get nervous,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So making sure the payments are paid on time it becomes vital in that aspect, because if you don't make a payment on time, then what the credit companies will do, they will reduce your buying power. So the same way they increase your buying power by making timely payments and making large payments, not just making a minimum payment on time. Most people think as long as I make the minimum payment, I will have a good credit score. You will, but your buying power will never increase, right? You need to show the financial institutions that my minimum payment is 300, my balance is 1,000, I'm paying the whole 1,000.
Yeah.
If I have the 1,000 available to me. Because by doing that, you're gonna increase your buying power 10 times faster than you would if you just paid the minimum payment.
Right.
Now, there are times, which is why I think credit is so great, because it gives you that flexibility. Because you have an option of paying the minimum, or you can pay the whole thing.
Right.
So being able to operate within that flexibility is something that cash can't give you.
Correct.
Only credit can give you that.
Yes, sir. Now, you said something about borrowing that I kind of want to come back to. What I surmise from that is that ideally your goal is to be able to borrow as much as you can to put to work.
Yes.
And if you've been able to, figure out what your ratios or your numbers are, then, let's say, for example, every $100,000 I borrow, I know that I can make for myself net after all the expenses are paid $500 a month, right? So then if for every $100,000 I borrow, I can service that debt, pay the expenses, and give myself $500 each month. Well, what if I borrowed $1 million? Then I could give myself $5,000 a month. If I can borrow $10 million, I can create $50,000 a month. So at least from my perspective, or some of what I'm hearing is, your ability to borrow and invest those funds into cash flow and assets is one of the main ways that you can build wealth in the form of equity, but also cash flow.
But here's the thing. So all those elements that you just spoke of are correct. I take exception to one, because you said how much I can make. The reality is you don't want to make anything, because if you make, you're gonna lose, because you have to pay taxes on what you make. You don't have to pay taxes on what you generate.
Okay.
Right? So focusing on how much money you can generate is more important than focusing on how much money you can make. Because if I generate $1 million,
Right.
and I'm able to offset that $1 million because I reinvested it to create more wealth.
Right.
Because obviously the more wealth you create, the more you need to find a way to kind of give it back so you can keep it.
Right.
Right? Because if you create profits at the end of the year, which is also important to do that. I'm not saying that it's not important to do that.
Right.
But if you're measuring your mindset by how much you're going to make, there's automatically going to be a reduction off of that, because you're going to get taxed. You get taxed on your net income. You don't get taxed on your gross income.
I hear that.
Right?
No, I hear that. But I would say that what you're saying makes 100% sense. And I would say that you want to reinvest as much and as quickly as you can, because it will offset your
So the
taxable
reinvestment aspect of it, right, is not going to be called proceeds.
Right.
Right? The reenactment is like you're putting that money back to work. You didn't make anything.
Right.
Right?
No, that makes sense.
There's no net return.
Yeah.
Right? There's just money that was stored as a result of everything that was going on. And I took that money before I can claim it as profit, and I put it back to work.
sir.
So now it's working. So now there's very little tax stuff that you kind of got to worry about, right? Until you get to a certain level, you're going to probably make so much money, it's going to be almost impossible not to claim that you're not making anything in terms of a net return. Right.
Right.
And in some instances, you want to show a net return. So it all depends on
Well,
what your strategy is.
I think it also depends on how good your professionals you're working with are too.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
even multi-billionaires, they're paying less taxes than everyday people because they
Why
have
though?
they have really they're reinvesting, like
That's
you
it.
said.
That's the key.
But I think they have smart professionals that they work with that are saying, look, this is how much you've made. Why don't you invest in, buy another building, because then you will offset your taxes.
Right.
Buy a jet plane,
Right.
or this,
But-
10,000
But
pound
not just
vehicle
buy
because-
it. Buy it for a business purpose.
Well, yeah.
Right.
I mean, yes,
so
I think
so
absolutely.
all you really need to know, right, from an investor perspective, is any money that is coming my way or I'm generating, I need to find a way to continue to invest in businesses. Right. You have some people that are so wealthy, they got like 100 businesses. That's the only reason it makes sense to have 100 businesses, is so you find a way to shelter the money that you're generating, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to have 100 businesses.
No, I
Right?
mean, I hear you.
You have
It
some of the
generates more
wealthiest
revenue.
individuals that have, hundreds of businesses, and the reason they have the hundreds of businesses is because it helps them keep their money.
Yes.
Right? And
Yep,
they
yep.
have to kind of put it into other spaces that are business centered to protect it from being taxed. And which is why most people don't understand, how can the wealthiest people in America pay the less taxes? Because they're creating more businesses. And you need that, right? Because
Yeah.
if they're not creating businesses, then who's going to have jobs? Right?
Yeah.
So it takes wealthy individuals to kind of do that in order to create jobs for people that are not as fortunate or don't have that mindset as a wealthy individual may have. So there's always a relationship between the two, right?
There is.
If I'm not taking my money and I'm putting it to work, right?
Yep.
And creating jobs for other people, then I'm probably all of us gonna get taxed one way or another.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if other people don't understand that a lot of the tax breaks that wealthy people are able to take advantage for are for the benefit of them, because they can provide jobs, right? They can
Yeah.
provide jobs for these individuals, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
hopefully those individuals at some point in their time, they can change their mindsets and then they can kind of play the roles, right? But that's what needs to happen, right? Otherwise you have no jobs.
Yeah.
And then you can't blame wealthy people for not having jobs, because they're the ones that are actually creating the jobs. It's not really the governments that are creating the jobs, even though you got government jobs, but they're very limited, right?
Yeah.
So it's those of those that have entrepreneurial mindsets, and that they're building wealth and understanding that through building their wealth, they have to reinvest. And they have to reinvest in a lot of different things in order to keep their money. But those things that they're reinvesting in are creating jobs for
Right.
people that need it.
Right. No, I hear you. And then one of the other things I wanted to touch on too was, you talk about the importance of credit, right? Another reason that I think credit is more important than the cash is that cash has no real value, right? It's really just paper that we say has a certain amount of value. And it's a medium of exchange, right? Like, to just hold cash in the bank it doesn't do you any good, doesn't do me any good. And quite frankly, even if you have a decent interest rate that you have today, then inflation is moving high, is higher than that. So you're still losing values of your dollars that sit still or in accounts. So it's important to have access to credit, because then you have the ability to move it around. It's called the velocity of money.
Right.
The more time it changes hands, the faster. $100 isn't just $100, right? Even as far as the government goes, if you have $100 and it changes hands 2 times, then the government can tax 2 people, right? But if it changes hands 10 times, then it can tax 10 people. So that's like the velocity of money, how many times it changes hands within a given time frame. But the reason that I wanted to get into that a little bit more. It's just I have friends and family who, like, if they get a little chunk of money, they get like really
Rich?
cautious with it. Well, no, they get like really cautious with it,
Okay.
like where they're afraid that they're gonna lose.
Yeah.
And I try to tell them that the value is not in the money. It was whatever value you created that gave you that money, right? So you have to redeploy it. And yeah, you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some. There's risk associated with everything, but you have to constantly be redeploying your funds because money in a bank account has no value.
Yeah, I think what happens is people associate the power that money commands, right? In only in the mindset, the power that money commands means that they have to have a measure of money to feel secure. A person that is credit worthy can have a bank account with nothing and probably get more than somebody that has a bank account with a lot of money but no credit. Right. And I learned that when I bought my first home because I was like, damn, I got a shitload of money. I can't buy a house unless I actually pay cash for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, I got very little money, but I can still go buy a freaking $1 million house.
Right.
Because my credit worthiness is so much stronger than the amount of cash. That's not to say you don't need any cash, right? Because you always got to have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
But banks see you as someone that is credible to extend money to, that is willing to pay them at a higher return than they pay people that keep their money in the bank and don't do nothing with.
Yep.
Right? Because if I put $1,000 in the bank and the bank is only paying me 1% a month, that $1,000 is not sitting in the bank.
Right.
The bankers are taking that money and they're making investments.
Yeah.
And they're giving it to people like us that are entrepreneurs who are paying for the use of it at a higher percentage.
Right.
And then the person that's letting it sit there is only getting 1%.
Yep.
Everybody else using that money is getting 10, 15, 20. That the money is using. And the very person that's keeping their money in the bank doing nothing with it, but sitting there feeling secure, is getting $3 a month.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So the banks are always going to control the money.
Yeah.
It's just you, the consumer or the investor, how much worth or value do you have to the bank? Are you just a bank account with money sitting there and they're exploiting those accounts and they're making a bunch of money? Or are you going to be like, I'm willing to pay you a higher percentage so you can get me more money? They're going to make money off you one way or another. The question is, how much are you going to make off of them?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you're building wealth, you want to be able to use the bank's money to create your own wealth.
As much as possible.
And you're paying them, they're getting a significant portion of it,
Yeah.
but you're making money as well.
Yeah.
The ones that's leaving it sitting there, they'll get $10 a month, whatever. I don't know how you can live on that, but you can get $10 a month. And the importance of the credit in terms, and I got to wrap it up with this one. I have to leave you on this one. Gotcha. The importance of credit is you don't necessarily need a job to build wealth.
Right.
What you need is idea and have some creativity and some entrepreneurship, right?
And the ability to execute.
And you have to have a decent credit score.
Yeah.
Because if you can have a 700 credit score with no job and you have access to a down payment, you can buy a house.
Yeah.
Right?
No, 100%.
But you need the credit score. You need to show yourself credit worthy, right? Because that's really where all your power is.
So you were saying that this is the last item, and I'm going to wrap it up with adding, and then maybe we get into this the next time.
Yeah.
So we focused on credit today, right? But in any acquisition, there's two portions. There's the credit portion, and then there's the equity portion, or the down payment, right? So the credit we talked to about in depth, and then maybe next time we can get into the equity a little bit. Because there's so many different ways that, saving it is the most common or the way most people know. But there's way more that you can do.
I can tell you one this, and we'll finish this. The more equity you have in assets, you have access to cash through that equity, no matter how much money you have in the bank.
That's one way we can elaborate on.
Yeah, definitely, man, definitely. All right, sounds good. But I gotta wrap it up.
Do a wrap up together. Like, hey, thanks for listening in. I gotta wrap up early, but we'll tune in next week.
Thanks for listening in. We talked about credit. Next time we'll get into equity a little bit more. and tune in next week for our conversation on equity.
Sounds good, brother. I gotta go. Talk to you, man. Good job.